You know what they say about keeping receipts? Well, I wish I'd known 27 years ago that I'd need every single one of them to prove my worth to people who were supposed to be my family. My name is Marlena, and this is the story of how I went from being the grateful daughter-in-law to the woman who finally said enough is enough. But first, let me tell you about the moment that shattered 27 years of trying to be perfect. It was a crisp October morning in 2023, the kind where the leaves in our suburban Denver neighborhood painted the streets in brilliant oranges and reds. I was sitting in my kitchen, steam rising from my coffee mug, when my phone buzzed with a group text that would change everything. The message was from my sister-in-law, Cordelia Whitmore. She'd sent it to the entire family group chat, including my husband Jasper, his brother Edmund, and both of my in-laws, Beatrice and Theodore Whitmore. Since Mom and Dad are getting older, we need to discuss who's been actually helping them over the years. Some people just show up for holidays and think that's enough. My hands trembled as I read those words. The coffee mug slipped slightly in my grip, and I had to set it down before I dropped it entirely. 27 years of marriage, 27 years of being part of this family, and this is what it had come to. But that wasn't even the worst part. What came next made my stomach drop to the floor. Edmund chimed in almost immediately. Cordelia's right. Marlena, you've been pretty absent when it comes to helping Mom and Dad. We've all noticed it. Then came the message that broke my heart. From Theodore, my father-in-law himself. It's true, dear. We appreciate that you come to family dinners, but we could have used more support over the years. Cordelia and Edmund have been our rocks. I stared at my phone in complete disbelief. The autumn sunlight streaming through my kitchen window suddenly felt cold and harsh. Was this really happening? After everything I'd done, everything I'd given, everything I'd sacrificed for this family? Jasper walked into the kitchen at that moment, his tie loose around his neck after another long day at his accounting firm. He took one look at my face and immediately knew something was wrong. Marlena, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. I handed him my phone without saying a word. I watched his face change as he read through the messages, his jawline tightening with each passing second. But instead of the outrage I expected, instead of the defense I desperately needed, he just sighed. Look, honey, maybe they have a point. You know how busy you've been with your nursing job. Maybe you could make more of an effort. Those words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. My own husband, the man I'd loved and supported for nearly 3 decades, was taking their side. The man I'd worked double shifts to help put through his CPA certification. The man whose family I'd embraced as my own from day one. Are you serious right now, Jasper? My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Are you actually serious? He had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. He loosened his tie completely and ran his hand through his graying hair. I'm just saying, maybe there's some truth to what they're saying. You know how you get when you're focused on work. Maybe you've been too busy to notice. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Jasper slept peacefully beside me. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m., but sleep was impossible. Their words kept echoing in my head, over and over like a broken record. Too busy to notice. Absent. Just showing up for holidays. But as I lay there in the darkness of our master bedroom, surrounded by the life we'd built together in our Tudor-style home, I started to remember. I started to really remember everything I'd done for the Whitmore family over the past 27 years. And that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. I'd been keeping receipts all along. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but because I'm the kind of person who keeps everything organized. Every receipt, every bank statement, every credit card statement, every calendar entry, every photo, every text message. I'd kept it all. By 3:30 a.m., I was wide awake, and I made a decision that would change everything. I slipped out of bed quietly, grabbed my laptop, and headed downstairs to my home office. If the Whitmore family wanted to play this game, if they wanted to question my contributions after 27 years, then I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. The truth. All of it. With documentation. I pulled out my filing cabinet, the one Jasper always teased me about being too organized with. Box after box of receipts, bank statements, photographs, and records. 27 years of my life with this family, all carefully documented and stored. As I opened the first box, labeled 1996-2000, I felt a mix of determination and heartbreak wash over me. I was about to embark on a journey through my own past, through every sacrifice I'd made, every dollar I'd spent, every moment I'd given to people who apparently didn't even notice. The first receipt I pulled out was from September 1997. Target, 847.32. I remembered this one clearly. It was for Beatrice's surprise 50th birthday party, the one I'd planned entirely by myself while Jasper was busy with tax season. I'd bought decorations, food, drinks, and even a new dress for Beatrice because I'd overheard her mentioning she had nothing to wear. The party had been a huge success. Beatrice had hugged me that night and told me I was the daughter she never had. Now, apparently, I was the daughter-in-law who never helped. As dawn broke over Denver, painting my office in soft pink and gold light, I continued going through my boxes. Receipt after receipt, memory after memory, sacrifice after sacrifice. Each piece of paper told a story that my in-laws seemed to have conveniently forgotten. By the time Jasper came downstairs for his morning coffee, I had dozens of receipts spread across my desk, organized by year and category. He stopped in the doorway of my office, taking in the scene with obvious confusion. "Marlena, what are you doing? It looks like a paper explosion in here." I looked up at him, and I could see in his reflection in my computer screen that my eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. But there was something else there too, something that hadn't been there in years. Determination. I'm getting ready to show your family exactly how much I've helped them over the past 27 years, since they seem to have forgotten. The next 3 days became a blur of organizing, scanning, and documenting. I took time off from my nursing job at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital, telling my supervisor I had a family emergency that required my immediate attention. It wasn't a lie, not really. My home office looked like a war room. I'd covered every available surface with receipts organized by year and type of expense. I'd created spreadsheets, printed bank statements, and even pulled old photos from storage boxes in our basement. The story these documents told was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Let me paint you a picture of what I discovered in those boxes. 1998, the year Theodore had his first heart attack. While everyone else panicked, I was the one who researched specialists, made appointments, and coordinated his care. I found receipts for gas driving back and forth to National Jewish Health, parking fees for his countless appointments, and groceries I'd bought to stock their house so Beatrice wouldn't have to worry about cooking while she stayed by his side. Total documented expenses, $3,247.89, but it wasn't just about the money. I'd used 16 vacation days that year to help with Theodore's recovery. 16 days of my own paid time off that I could have spent with Jasper, or on a vacation, or simply resting from my demanding job as a cardiac nurse. 1999, Edmund's wedding year. Cordelia loves to tell people how she planned the entire wedding, how she was the maid of honor who made everything perfect. What she doesn't mention is who paid for the flowers when the florist demanded payment up front and Edmund was short on cash. Receipt after receipt told the real story. The bridal shower I'd hosted at our house, $892.17. The bachelor party expenses when Edmund couldn't afford the deposit for the venue, $567.43. The wedding gift that Jasper and I gave them, $20,500. But that wasn't even the biggest expense. When Edmund's bride, Vivian, needed a wedding dress, but her family couldn't afford the one she'd fallen in love with, guess who quietly stepped in? The receipt was right there in my files. $1,847.50 for a dress from a boutique in Cherry Creek. I remembered that day so clearly. Vivian had called me crying, saying her dream dress was too expensive and she'd have to settle for something else. I'd driven straight to the boutique and put it on my credit card, telling Vivian it was an early wedding gift from her new family. She'd hugged me so tightly that day, tears streaming down her face, telling me she'd never forget my kindness. Apparently, she had forgotten. They all had. 2001, the year Cordelia graduated from college. She likes to brag about how she paid her own way through school, how independent and self-sufficient she was. But my receipts told a different story. Textbooks, 147 times 23 times over 4 years. Car repairs when her old Honda kept breaking down, 291.54. Rent assistance when she was short 3 different months, $150. Groceries and care packages, 896.32. And then there was her graduation party, the one she claims Edmund organized. The receipts showed the truth. I'd rented the community center, hired the caterer, bought decorations, and even paid for professional photos. Total cost, $1,893.90. As I continued going through my files, a pattern emerged that made my chest tighten with anger and sadness. Every major life event, every crisis, every celebration in the Whitmore family had my financial fingerprints all over it. But somehow, my contributions had been erased from their collective memory. 2003, Beatrice's breast cancer diagnosis. While everyone else was focused on the emotional support, I was handling the practical details. Gas money for treatments, $456.78. Parking fees at the cancer center, $234.50. Special foods and supplements her oncologist recommended, $1,247.83. But the biggest expense that year wasn't financial. It was personal. I'd rearranged my entire work schedule to drive Beatrice to chemotherapy appointments when Theodore couldn't handle seeing her in that state. I'd held her hand during the scary moments, cleaned her house when she was too weak to do it herself, and bought her beautiful scarves when she lost her hair. 2005, the year Jasper and I bought our current house. We'd been saving for years, dreaming of the perfect place to start our family. But 3 weeks before closing, Theodore needed emergency roof repairs after a hailstorm. His insurance would cover most of it, but not the deductible. I found the cashier's check stub, $7,500. Our entire down payment fund, wiped out to fix his roof. We'd had to get a smaller house, take on a higher mortgage, and delay starting our family for another 2 years while we rebuilt our savings. Did Theodore remember this sacrifice? Did any of them remember that we'd put their needs before our own dreams? By day 3 of my documentation project, I had created something that looked like a legal case file. Spreadsheets showing nearly $78,000 in documented expenses over 27 years. Hundreds of hours of my time. Countless sacrifices, both financial and personal. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real story was in the photos I'd found. The ones that showed me at every single family event, every milestone, every crisis. There I was, in the background of Edmund's graduation, organizing the reception. There I was next to Beatrice's hospital bed, holding her hand during her surgery recovery. There I was at every birthday party, every holiday, every celebration, making sure everything ran smoothly. And in every single photo, I was smiling. Genuinely smiling, because I'd believed I was part of something beautiful. I'd believed I was helping to build a strong, loving family. The irony wasn't lost on me that my professional life had prepared me perfectly for this moment. As a cardiac nurse, I'd learned to stay calm under pressure, to organize critical information quickly, and to present facts in a clear, undeniable way. Those skills were serving me well now. On Thursday evening, as I was putting the finishing touches on my documentation, Jasper came into my office with a cup of tea and a concerned expression. "Honey, you've been in here for 3 days straight. Maybe it's time to let this go." They probably didn't mean anything by those comments. I looked up at him, this man I'd loved for so long, and realized that he truly didn't understand. He didn't see the hours I'd spent organizing his family's lives, managing their crises, supporting their dreams. To him, it had all been invisible, just part of what wives and daughters-in-law were supposed to do. "Jasper, do you know how much money we've given your family over the years?" He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. I don't know. A few thousand, maybe? We help out when we can. Try $78,000, and that's just what I can document with receipts. His face went pale. That can't be right. I turned my laptop screen toward him, showing him the spreadsheet I'd created. Line by line, year by year, every expense laid out in black and white. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the data. I had no idea it was that much, he whispered. That's the problem, Jasper. You had no idea because you never paid attention. None of you did. I've been quietly taking care of your family for 27 years, and apparently, I've been invisible the entire time. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept again, my mind racing with everything I'd discovered about my own life. I'd spent nearly 3 decades being the perfect daughter-in-law, the helpful sister-in-law, the supportive family member. And for what? To be accused of not helping. To be dismissed as someone who just showed up for holidays. But as I sat in my kitchen that morning looking out at the rain-soaked trees in our backyard, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. I was beyond anger. I was determined. The Whitmore family was about to learn exactly what kind of woman they'd been taking for granted all these years. Sunday dinner at the Whitmore house had been a tradition for 27 years. Every week, unless someone was deathly ill or out of town, we all gathered around Beatrice's dining room table in their craftsman-style home in the Highlands neighborhood, the table that I'd helped them buy when their old one broke in 2008. This particular Sunday, November 5th, 2023, would be different. This Sunday, I was coming prepared. I'd spent all of Saturday morning at FedEx office, printing and organizing my documentation into presentation folders. Professional, clean, and absolutely undeniable. I created 4 identical folders, one for each family member, containing copies of every receipt, bank statement, photo, and summary sheet I'd compiled. The folders were thick, nearly 2 inches each, bound with heavy-duty clips and labeled with their names in my neat handwriting. Inside each folder was a cover letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times, trying to find the right tone between hurt and dignity. As Jasper and I drove through the familiar streets of their neighborhood, past the houses where I'd attended dozens of block parties and holiday gatherings, I felt a strange sense of calm. The autumn leaves were falling steadily, creating a carpet of gold and crimson on the sidewalks. Are you sure you want to do this? Jasper asked for the 100th time since we'd left our house. Maybe we could just talk to them privately, work this out without all the drama. I looked at him, this man who still didn't fully grasp what was about to happen. Jasper, they humiliated me in a group text. They questioned my character and my contributions to this family in front of everyone. If they wanted to handle this privately, they should have thought of that before they decided to publicly shame me. We pulled into the familiar driveway, past the garden that I'd helped Beatrice plant and maintain for over a decade. The same garden where I'd spent countless Saturday mornings pulling weeds, planting flowers, and helping her create the beautiful space she was so proud of. Walking up to the front door, I carried my leather briefcase containing the folders. I dressed carefully for this moment, choosing a navy blue dress that was professional but not intimidating, paired with the pearl necklace Beatrice had given me for my 40th birthday. Cordelia answered the door, her blonde hair perfectly styled as always. She greeted us with her usual air of superiority, barely making eye contact with me. "Oh, Marlena, I'm so glad you could make it. I was worried you might be too busy with work again." The dig was obvious and intentional. 6 days ago, it would have hurt me. Today, it just made me more determined. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Cordelia. Family is so important to me. Edmund and Vivian were already in the living room, their 3 children playing with toys in the corner. The same toys I'd given them for birthdays and Christmases over the years. Edmund looked up as we entered, his expression slightly uncomfortable. He clearly remembered the group text conversation and wasn't sure how to act around me. Theodore was in his favorite armchair, reading the Denver Post through his reading glasses. At 78, he still cut an imposing figure, though his hair had gone completely white, and his movements were slower than they used to be. He looked up as we entered, giving us his typical warm smile. "There's my favorite daughter-in-law," he said, struggling to his feet to give me a hug. The irony of his words, given what he'd written in that group text, was almost overwhelming. But I hugged him back, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave, the same brand he'd worn for as long as I'd known him. Beatrice emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. At 75, she was still beautiful, her silver hair always perfectly coiffed, her makeup subtle but flawless. She'd been like a second mother to me for so many years, which made her silence during the group text conversation even more painful. "Marlena, dear, you look lovely. How was your week?" The question was innocent enough, but I could hear the underlying tension. They all knew this dinner was going to be different. The group text had changed the dynamic, and everyone could feel it. It was very enlightening, actually. I spent a lot of time going through old memories and reflecting on the past 27 years. Dinner proceeded much as it always did. Beatrice had made her famous pot roast, the recipe I'd helped her perfect over the years when she was struggling with cooking for larger groups. The conversation was polite but strained, everyone dancing around the elephant in the room. It wasn't until we'd finished the main course and Beatrice was serving her apple pie, the one made with apples from the tree in their backyard that I'd helped them plant in 2001, that I decided it was time. "Before we have dessert, I have something I'd like to share with everyone." The room went quiet. Even the children seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere and stopped their chatter. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the 4 folders, setting them on the table. Last Monday, I received some very hurtful messages suggesting that I haven't been helpful to this family over the years, that I just show up for holidays and don't really contribute. Cordelia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Edmund suddenly found his napkin very interesting. Theodore and Beatrice exchanged glances. Now, I could have just been hurt and let it go. But you know me, I like to be thorough. So I spent this week going through my records, and I thought you might be interested in seeing exactly what my contributions to this family have looked like over the past 27 years. I handed each of them a folder. These are copies, so please keep them. I think you'll find the contents very illuminating. Jasper looked at me with a mixture of pride and concern. He'd seen the contents of these folders, but watching his family receive them was clearly making him nervous. Cordelia was the first to open her folder. I watched her face change as she flipped through the pages. Her usual confident expression faltered, replaced by something I'd never seen from her before. Genuine shock. "What is this?" she asked, her voice smaller than usual. "Those are receipts, bank statements, and documentation of every financial contribution I've made to this family over the past 27 years. The first section covers general family expenses. The second section details my specific contributions to each of you individually." Edmund had opened his folder and was staring at a receipt from his wedding expenses. "Marlena, I don't understand. Why did you keep all of this?" "I didn't keep it to hold over anyone's head, Edmund. I kept it because I'm organized, and because these receipts represent some of the most meaningful moments of my life. Every dollar I spent was spent with love, because I considered myself part of this family." Theodore was looking at the summary sheet I'd created, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. $78,000, he read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's just what I could document with receipts," I said calmly. "It doesn't include the value of my time off work, the hours I've spent helping with various projects, or the emotional support I've provided during difficult times." Beatrice was crying. Actual tears were streaming down her face as she looked through the photos I'd included. Photos of me at every major family event, every crisis, every celebration. Photos that told the story of a woman who had truly been present for this family in every way that mattered. "Marlena, I had no idea," she whispered. "I mean, I remembered some of these things, but seeing it all together like this, that's the problem," I said, my voice steady and calm. "None of you had any idea. For 27 years, I've been quietly supporting this family, financially and emotionally. I've sacrificed my own dreams, my own savings, my own time, because I loved you all and wanted to be helpful. I pulled out one more document from my briefcase, a single sheet of paper with a simple list. This is what I remember that isn't documented in those folders. The 16 vacation days I used in 1998, when Theodore was recovering from his heart attack. The sleep I lost staying up with Beatrice during her chemotherapy treatments. The weekend I spent cleaning out their basement when they were too overwhelmed to do it themselves. The countless hours I've spent listening, supporting, advising, and caring. The room was completely silent except for the sound of Beatrice's quiet sobs. But apparently, according to last Monday's group text, I just show up for holidays and don't really help. Cordelia looked up from her folder, her face flushed with embarrassment. Marlena, we didn't mean... Yes, you did mean it, I said, cutting her off gently but firmly. You meant every word. And you know what? Maybe you were right. Maybe I haven't been helping in the way you wanted me to help. Maybe my contributions haven't been visible enough, dramatic enough, or appreciated enough. I stood up from the table, my legs steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. So I've made a decision. From now on, I'm going to help exactly as much as you think I've been helping all these years, which, according to you, is basically not at all. The weeks following that Sunday dinner were unlike anything I'd experienced in 27 years of marriage. The silence from the Whitmore family was deafening, and the change in my own household was dramatic. Jasper spent the first few days after the dinner trying to convince me to apologize, to smooth things over, to go back to the way things had been. He couldn't understand why I was so hurt, why I couldn't just let it go. They're embarrassed, Marlena. You humiliated them with all those receipts. Can't you see that? I was in our kitchen, making dinner for just the two of us for the first time in decades. No extra portions for unexpected family drop-ins. No planning around Theodore's dietary restrictions. No accommodating Cordelia's latest diet trend. I humiliated them? I set down my wooden spoon and turned to face him. Jasper, they humiliated me first. They questioned my character and my contributions to this family in a group text. All I did was provide evidence to the contrary. But those receipts, Marlena, going back 27 years, don't you think that was a little vindictive? That word stopped me cold. Vindictive. After everything I'd done, after all the love and support and sacrifice, showing the truth was vindictive. You know what's vindictive, Jasper. 42 years of marriage, and you're taking their side instead of mine. You're more concerned about their embarrassment than you are about my pain. He looked genuinely confused, and that confusion hurt almost as much as his family's accusations had. I'm not taking sides. I just think maybe you're overreacting. That night, I made another decision that surprised even me. I set up the guest bedroom for myself. Not out of anger, but out of a need for space to think, to process, to figure out who I was when I wasn't constantly trying to please the Whitmore family. The first few nights were strange. Our house felt different, quieter, but also somehow more peaceful. I could read before bed without worrying about waking Jasper. I could get up early for my morning runs without tiptoeing around. And for the first time in years, I wasn't checking my phone constantly for family emergencies, requests for help, or last-minute dinner plan changes. 3 weeks after the dinner, Beatrice called me. I was at work in the middle of my shift at the cardiac unit when my phone rang. Seeing her name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. Marlena, dear, could we talk? I mean, really talk? Her voice sounded older, frailer than I remembered. Of course, Beatrice. When? Could you come by this afternoon? Theodore is at his book club and I'd like to speak with you privately. I arranged to leave work an hour early and drove to the house that had been like a second home to me for so many years. The autumn leaves had been raked and bagged, probably by the lawn service I'd found and recommended to them 3 years earlier, when Theodore's arthritis made yard work too difficult. Beatrice met me at the door, and I could see immediately that she'd been crying. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her makeup smudged. "Oh, Marlena," she said, pulling me into a tight hug before I'd even stepped inside. "I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." We sat in her living room, the same room where I'd spent countless hours over the years, the room where I'd helped her recover from her cancer treatments, where we'd planned family parties, where she'd given me advice about marriage and life. "I've been going through those receipts you gave us," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke, "and I've been remembering things I somehow forgot. Or maybe I didn't forget them, maybe I just took them for granted." She pulled out a tissue from the box on her coffee table. "Theodore's heart attack in 1998. I remember you being there, of course, but I'd forgotten about all the appointments, all the driving, all the research you did to find the best doctors. I was so scared, so focused on just getting through each day, that I didn't really see everything you were doing behind the scenes." I felt my own eyes starting to fill with tears. This was the conversation I'd hoped for, but hadn't dared to expect. "And Edmund's wedding," she continued. "Cordelia has always taken credit for making that wedding perfect, and I let her because she needed to feel important. But you were the one who saved the day when things went wrong. You were the one who made sure everything worked out." She reached across the coffee table and took my hand. "How did I forget so much? How did we all forget?" "I think it's because I made it look easy," I said softly. "I never wanted anyone to feel guilty or obligated. I helped because I loved you all, and I wanted our family to be strong and happy. But maybe by making it look effortless, I made it invisible. That doesn't excuse what we said in that text message, what I didn't say to defend you." She squeezed my hand tighter. "I was a coward, Marlena. When Cordelia and Edmund started talking about who helped and who didn't, I should have spoken up immediately. I should have reminded them of everything you've done. Instead, I stayed silent, and that silence was a betrayal. We talked for 2 hours that afternoon. Really talked in a way we hadn't in years. She told me about her fears of getting older, of becoming a burden, of losing her independence. I told her about feeling taken for granted, about questioning my place in the family, about the pain of being accused of not caring. "What can I do to fix this?" she asked as I was getting ready to leave. "I don't need you to fix anything, Beatrice. I just need you to see me, really see me. I've been part of this family for 27 years, and I've loved every one of you like you were my own blood. I just want that to be acknowledged and appreciated." The conversation with Beatrice was the beginning of a series of difficult but necessary discussions. Edmund called me the next week, his voice shaky and apologetic. He'd gone through his folder multiple times, he said, and had been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about his own memory and gratitude. "I convinced myself over the years that I'd paid you back for the wedding expenses," he admitted. "But looking at these receipts, I realize I never did. I just told myself I had, because it was easier than facing the fact that I'd never properly thanked you. Cordelia took longer to come around. In fact, it took a family crisis to finally break through her pride and defensiveness. In December, Theodore had another heart episode. Not as serious as the 1998 heart attack, but scary enough to land him in the hospital for observation. When Beatrice called the family to let everyone know, my phone didn't ring. For the first time in 27 years, I wasn't part of the emergency contact list. I found out about Theodore's hospitalization from Jasper, who'd heard from Edmund. The old me would have dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. The new me sat with the information for several hours, trying to decide how I felt about being excluded. In the end, I decided that my love for Theodore was stronger than my hurt feelings. I went to the hospital, not as part of the official family response team, but as someone who cared about an old man who'd been important to me for nearly 3 decades. I found Cordelia alone in the waiting room, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. She looked up as I approached, her usual perfect composure completely gone. "Marlena, what are you doing here? I heard about Theodore's episode. I wanted to make sure he was okay." She stared at me for a long moment, and then she started crying. Not the delicate tears of a woman trying to preserve her makeup, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who had been holding everything together for too long. "I can't do this," she gasped between sobs. "I thought I could handle everything, be the perfect daughter, the one who takes care of everyone, but I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to coordinate his care, how to talk to the doctors, how to make sure Mom is eating and sleeping." I sat down beside her, and after a moment's hesitation, put my arm around her shoulders. "You don't have to do it alone, Cordelia. But I said those horrible things about you. I was so jealous, Marlena. You always made everything look so easy, so effortless. You knew exactly what to do in every situation, and I felt like I could never measure up. So I convinced myself that you weren't really doing that much, that it just seemed like you were doing more because you were quieter about it." It was the most honest conversation Cordelia and I had ever had. She told me about feeling like she was always competing with me for the title of best daughter, about resenting how naturally caregiving seemed to come to me, about feeling guilty that she didn't have the same instincts. "I need your help," she said finally, "not just with Dad, but with learning how to be better at this, how to take care of people the way you do." Over the following months, something beautiful began to emerge from the wreckage of that terrible group text conversation. The Whitmore family dynamics started to shift in ways that were healthier for everyone. Cordelia and I developed a partnership in caring for Theodore and Beatrice. Instead of competing or working separately, we divided responsibilities based on our strengths. I handled medical coordination and complex caregiving decisions, while she focused on daily check-ins and social engagement. Edmund started contributing financially to his parents' care in a more systematic way, setting up automatic transfers to help with their increasing medical expenses. He also began acknowledging my past contributions more openly, thanking me specifically for things he'd previously taken for granted. Theodore and Beatrice made an effort to include me more deliberately in family decisions and to express their appreciation more clearly. Instead of assuming I'd always be available to help, they started asking and thanking. But the most significant change was in my marriage with Jasper. The crisis had forced us both to examine patterns that had been developing for years. He began to see how he'd been taking my contributions for granted, not just with his family, but in our own relationship. "I never realized how much you were carrying," he told me one evening in February, as we sat together in our living room for the first time in months. "I thought you liked taking care of everyone. I thought it made you happy." "It did make me happy for a long time," I replied honestly. "But happiness built on invisibility and lack of appreciation isn't sustainable. I needed to know that what I was doing mattered, that it was seen and valued." We started going to couples counseling, something I'd suggested years earlier, but Jasper had always dismissed as unnecessary. Now he was the one who found the therapist and made the first appointment. In therapy, we talked about the ways we'd both contributed to the dynamic that had nearly destroyed our marriage. I learned that my tendency to handle everything quietly, while well-intentioned, had sometimes excluded Jasper from opportunities to contribute. He learned that his assumption that I would always be available to manage family crises had prevented him from developing those skills himself. Slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and shared responsibility. I moved back into our bedroom, but we established new boundaries about family obligations and decision-making. By spring of 2024, nearly 6 months after the receipt revelation, we had our first normal family dinner in ages. But normal looked different now. Instead of me quietly ensuring everything ran smoothly while everyone else enjoyed themselves, we all contributed to making the evening successful. Cordelia brought flowers and helped set the table. Edmund arrived early to help Theodore with some household repairs. Jasper and I brought dessert and wine, but more importantly, Jasper actively participated in the kitchen prep instead of just socializing. During dinner, something happened that had never happened in 27 years of family gatherings. Beatrice raised her glass and proposed a toast. "To Marlena," she said, her voice clear and strong, "for 27 years of love, support, and dedication that we somehow managed to take for granted. We see you now, and we're grateful every day that you didn't give up on us completely. Everyone raised their glasses, even the grandchildren who didn't fully understand what was happening, but could sense the importance of the moment. And to second chances, I added, raising my own glass. To families that can learn and grow and become better versions of themselves. As I looked around that table, at these people who had caused me so much pain, but also so much joy over the years, I realized something important. The receipts I'd kept hadn't just been documentation of financial transactions. They'd been proof of love, evidence of commitment, records of a life lived in service to people I cared about. But more than that, they'd been the key to reclaiming my own worth and dignity. By showing them the tangible evidence of my contributions, I'd forced everyone, including myself, to see the value in what I'd been giving so freely for so long. The woman who had been accused of just showing up for holidays was gone. In her place was someone who knew her own worth, who could set boundaries, who could ask for appreciation and expect to receive it. And the family that had taken her for granted, they were learning to be grateful, to be more aware, to be better. It wasn't a perfect transformation. We still had difficult moments, times when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But now we had the tools and the awareness to address problems before they became crises. The most surprising outcome of the whole experience was how it changed my relationship with money and generosity. I didn't stop helping the family financially when they needed it, but I did start being more intentional about it. Instead of quietly handling expenses and hoping someone would notice, I began having conversations about needs and contributions. If you need help with Mom's medical bills, I told Edmund during one such conversation, I'm happy to contribute, but let's talk about it openly, make a plan together, and acknowledge what everyone is giving. This transparency made everyone more comfortable, both in asking for help and in offering it. It also led to more equitable sharing of financial responsibilities, as other family members stepped up once they fully understood the scope of ongoing needs. By the 1-year anniversary of the group text that had started it all, I was a different person. I was still generous, still caring, still committed to my family, but I was also respected, appreciated, and valued in ways I'd never experienced before. The receipts I'd kept for 27 years had taught us all an invaluable lesson about the difference between being taken for granted and being truly appreciated. And in the end, that lesson was worth every penny I'd spent and every hour I'd invested in loving this complicated, imperfect, but ultimately precious family. Some people keep receipts for tax purposes. I'd kept them for love purposes. And when love was questioned, those little pieces of paper had been able to speak the truth more clearly than words ever could. The Whitmore family learned that appreciation isn't something you can assume or take for granted. It's something you have to actively express, regularly demonstrate, and never stop working to deserve. And I learned that my worth isn't dependent on other people's recognition, but my happiness certainly is enhanced when the people I love take the time to truly see and acknowledge what I bring to their lives. The receipts are back in their boxes now, filed away in my organized system, but the lessons they taught us are still very much active in our daily lives. Every family dinner, every shared expense, every moment of support is now accompanied by awareness and gratitude. Sometimes the most powerful truths are hidden in the most ordinary places. In my case, they were hidden in 27 years of carefully kept receipts, waiting for the moment when they would be needed to restore balance to a family that had forgotten how to say thank you. And now, finally, gratefully, wonderfully, they remember.